Hi, my name's Matt Catterin, and the essential question for class this week is surrounds the integration of professional baseball, and more specifically Jackie Robinson, who ended up breaking the color barrier. The first primary source I chose was Nowhere So Sharply Drawn as in Baseball. This details manager Charlie Cushman's account of actually coming to Buffalo, and where Buffalo had a African American second baseman named Frank Grant. He had accidentally hit a white player on the opposing team named Gus Alberts, and injured him. The team then decided to go after Grant, mainly because he was black. And another player on the opposing team, Ed Crane, hit Grant with his shoulder in the pit of his stomach, where Grant had to be taken off on a stretcher and had a three-week recovery. Obviously, this wasn't Major League Baseball. This was minor leagues. But it really details the terrible environment that black players had to face when integrating and playing with other white players. A couple quotes that really stuck out to me in this source were, first, probably in no other business in America is the color line so finely drawn as in baseball. And an African who attempts to put on a uniform and go in among a lot of white players is taking his life in his hands. This kind of shows the severity and seriousness involved in the segregation of baseball and the danger that was faced by black players and the courage necessary to really break that color barrier that Jackie Robinson ultimately did. The second primary source I used was Branch Rickey discussing Jackie Robinson, excerpts from 1956. First of all, Branch Rickey joined the Dodgers in a few years before Jackie Robinson joined the club, and he was the team's GM. And he began what he called his noble experiment in 1946, where he wanted to integrate black players into Major League Baseball. He mentions throughout this excerpt about getting the right man off the field. He spent a lot of time studying Negro League players to find candidates who could tolerate the abuse and vitriol they'd face from crowds and opposing players, and maybe even their own teammates. One quote that I really liked from this excerpt is, "I wanted a man of exceptional intelligence, and he could control the responsibilities of himself to his race and carry that load." This quote kind of reinforces the amount of pressure that was on Jackie Robinson, because unfortunately Jackie had to not only represent himself, but he had to represent, all African Americans in one way, and definitely, many African American baseball players who had hopes of playing in the major leagues. My Library of Congress source kind of just details Jackie Robinson's career as a Dodger from 1947 to 1956. Really, the overall message of detailing his career is to show that obviously Branch Rickey picked the right man for the job, because not only was Jackie Robinson a great person, but he was an equally as good baseball player. In his 10-year career, he hit .311, played in 6 World Series, and stole home 19 times. For any baseball fans, you may know that hitting over 300 for your batting average is an amazing career. In 1949, he won the National League Most Valuable Player, where he hit .342 and had 37 stolen bases. One thing that I took from this article was the fact that although he wasn't confrontational per se, he was strong and stood up for his beliefs, and he became known to protest unfair umpire calls. He would obviously protest hotels that wouldn't allow him to stay with his teammates, and he would protest other teams that wouldn't hire black players. And frankly, his strength was inspiring to many around the country. And with him being a strong character like he had, he won the respect of his teammates and other players around the league eventually, and really became a dominant symbol of black opportunity. Furthermore, he opened the door for others. Quickly after he joined the Dodgers, Dan Bankhead pitched for the Dodgers as well. Larry Doby played for the Cleveland Indians, and Henry Thompson and Willard Brown played for the St. Louis Browns. It took 12 years for every team to integrate. So by 1959, every player had at the time or had prior to that a black player playing on their team, which is pretty amazing to think about. To talk about the biases evident throughout the sources and the kind of the overall message that ties all the sources together. First of all, Jackie Robinson shouldn't have had to have been a Hall of Fame player, and as good of a person as he was and as strong of a person as he was, but it absolutely helped because his success really catapulted the full integration of Major League Baseball. Branch Rickey discussed the type of person he was looking for, someone strong, as I previously mentioned, but willing to not be confrontational. Obviously, all of these sources focus on the immense pressure that was on Jackie Robinson to perform and deal with the hatred that was thrown his way. This wasn't specifically brought up in any of the sources, but just tying in with my first source, the Nowhere So Sharply article, I'm sure that several times players tried to injure Jackie, and the restraint he must have shown to not get in many fights and to keep his cool in situations like that really speaks to the type of person he was. And he was absolutely the catalyst for the complete integration of Major League Baseball, which took 12 years after 60 plus years of not having a single black player in the league. For my secondary source, I chose the first source, which was a background article. It really detailed the arguments for and against segregation of baseball at the time. And it's kind of interesting to look into, the argument for segregation, because I think almost all of us would, certainly say there's no argument to be made on that side. The arguments against segregation are obvious. First, it's immoral to separate players based on race. There were many talented players in the Negro Leagues that would have been successful in major leagues, Jackie Robinson being one. African Americans proved to be courageous and capable soldiers fighting for the United States in World War II, and that was what some proponents of ending segregation at the time used in their arguments. And there was the possibility that it could expand the fan base by adding African American fans who were currently fans of Negro League teams. The argument for segregation at the time was some people pointed to saving the African American players from facing the harsh crowds, the opposing players trying to hurt them, et cetera, et cetera. Losing good players would end up hurting the Negro League, diminishing its fans, and frankly, that is what eventually happened. The Negro League did dry up because they began losing all of their good players to Major League Baseball. Bob Gibson is a very famous pitcher that left the Negro Leagues at the end of his career to go to the Cardinals. The other argument in regards to crowds were that, certain crowds would decide not to come to Major League games if they included black players on their favorite team. Really, this article gave a detailed background on both of these arguments, and it stressed that race relations in baseball at the time really reflected race relations in the United States. And at the end of it all, on April 15th, 1997, the MLB retired Jackie Robinson's number 42 jersey, so no player for any team can ever wear it again. It just shows the importance that he had to the game of baseball today. And my key takeaway was clearly baseball segregation was wrong, and Jackie Robinson was the perfect player to end it.